The New South Wales government's demanding the federal government give the state its fair share of GST. It's after revelations that New South Wales set to lose hundreds of millions of dollars in the latest GST carve-up. The Treasurer of New South Wales, Daniel Mookhey, voiced his concern about the state being disadvantaged by the changes.
At a time where we are taking on the bulk of the nation's population growth, we are seeing New South Wales fall behind when it comes to GST share, when it comes to infrastructure share as well. So we want to have a good conversation with the Commonwealth. We make the point, a system this absurd cannot last, it needs reform.
I recognise the New South Wales Treasurer is new to his job, but the system has been there for a very long time. We have not changed the system. Every year there is a debate.
Independent MPs say the government needs to revisit the process to ensure New South Wales doesn't miss out on necessary funding.
I agree with the New South Wales Treasurer that New South Wales takes a lot of the population, carry a lot of that weight. So I think that the government have to really revisit this whole deal because, as I said, like New South Wales, we need the money.
Let's go live to the New South Wales Premier, Chris Minns. Premier, thanks for your time. Will you hold back additional funding for the NDIS because you're getting less GST?
Oh, look, we don't want to have a race to the bottom, Kieran. We really want to solve problems between the states and the Commonwealth, but we're asking for what I think is not an unreasonable proposition, and that is that New South Wales is able to claim its share of federal government tax dollars. It's collected in this state, it's sent to the Commonwealth government, and we need to be in a position where we can fund essential services in New South Wales.
Has anything really changed, though, in this GST carve-up? Isn't this just the way the Commonwealth Grants Commission always does things? You got more royalties via coal, therefore they adjust the GST.
No, it isn't. In 2018, the system was changed. As a result of that, if the previous regime was in place, we would have got 94 cents in the dollar. Now we're looking at a situation where we're going to get 86 cents in the dollar, and a lot of that money is going to be sent to Western Australia, which is chock full of cash from the mining boom, or down to Victoria, which is now a welfare state receiving a whole bunch of money from the pockets of New South Wales families. Now, look, we're happy to sit around the table. We don't want to fight. We want an outcome. But at the end of the day, New South Wales just can't eat last every single time the states get around the table. We've got a situation where we take 37% of inbound migration. We have 31% of the nation's population, and we're getting such a small share of Commonwealth distribution of funds. Something's got to change.
Sure, and I know we're talking about a super complex area. The Commonwealth Grants Commission, as you called it, the dark arts of how they come up with these numbers. But can you give our viewers a sense of what the fundamental problem is here? Why are the numbers so out of whack in your view?
I think the fundamental problem is that this should be far, far simpler and way more transparent to the people who actually send their cash to the federal government. And the easiest way of doing it is to distribute the funds per capita based on population size. Now, I know that there'll be smaller states that need top-up funds like South Australia, the Northern Territory and Tasmania, and the federal government's got more than enough in grants to do just that. But when you've got an opaque system where no one or very few people understand how money is distributed and New South Wales receives a declining share, we're now in a situation where we're looking at our budget, we're looking at where we need to spend funds, and obviously New South Wales taxpayers were relying on those funds for essential services in the state. I think most taxpayers in this state, we're the least parochial of any jurisdiction in the country. Most New South Wales taxpayers would say, fair enough, funds to Tasmania and the Northern Territory, that's fine. But when we're sending so much money by the bucket load down to Victoria, well, obviously the system's not working.
When you spoke at the start of our chat this afternoon by talking about you don't want to race to the bottom, I understand that, but you also want to represent your taxpayers. So will you look to get more funds, those catch-up dollars that maybe would have been going to the smaller states on a per capita arrangement, but will you be seeking those catch-up dollars elsewhere, say through infrastructure, education or health funding?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if there's going to be no movement on GST relativities, if that pool's not going to be broken up, then we'll be looking specifically at help from the Commonwealth for infrastructure funds. And, you know, in infrastructure, the story's no better. We estimate that over the next 10 years, our share of infrastructure dollars will be 23%, notwithstanding the fact that we've got over 30% of the nation's population. Now, we've got to build metros, bus links, new schools, new hospitals. I think the taxpayers of this state are entitled to ask the Commonwealth Government what's going on here. And I realise this might be accidental. It might be as a result of the Commonwealth's distribution of the GST, but we can't just throw our hands in the air and say, oh, well, that's the way it's always been done. We're not going to change anything. Western Australia didn't do that a few years ago, and I'm signalling that New South Wales isn't either.
The Prime Minister said repeatedly today when asked about this that it's an independent process. It's the Commonwealth Grants Commission that does it at arm's length, saying that this is not a federal government decision. What do you want from them?
Well, at the end of the day, there was a carve-out for Western Australia. There was relativities that were changed when it comes to Victorian infrastructure projects. The whole system was changed in 2018. I don't believe it's in the country's interest for everyone to throw their hands in the air and say, sorry, there's nothing we can do. If New South Wales were to receive its share based on its population, we would have an additional $3.6 billion, which means, in personal terms, I could employ an extra 10,000 police and 10,000 nurses, both. That's a huge amount of money. Now, if the government doesn't want to go all the way to a per capita share, well, let's look at the fundamentals that are determining who gets what, because at the moment, this state is not getting anywhere near what it needs to grow and prosper, and I think fairness for New South Wales taxpayers.
A few other issues now that Opposition Leader Peter Dutton, a similar path to what you've done this week on the issue of youth crime, posting crimes online via social media. He wants to criminalise it via the federal parliament. You're heading in a similar direction in New South Wales, aren't you?
Yeah, we've introduced legislation into the lower house this week, their so-called post and boast offences. Look, I don't want to be in a situation where particularly young people are trying to one-up themselves by posting the most outrageous crimes on social media. We've got the latest statistics came out today. We do have an issue, particularly in relation to youth crime, and it's a suite of reforms and changes that we're implementing that we hope will lead to a decline in the criminal rate, particularly in regional New South Wales. Something's got to change, and we're determined to see a turnaround.
The Greens say it's a knee-jerk reaction. It'll further traumatise the kids involved. What do you say to that?
No, I think it's a balanced approach, but, I mean, we can't have a situation where we do have repeat offenders committing the same or similar offences over and over again and getting bail and being put back into the community if for no other reason than the actual offenders. It's not in their interests. I'm deeply worried that a young person in particular will kill themselves or their family members or their friends or a member of the public in the commission of these crimes, and something's got to change.
On another matter, something we spoke about in the lead up to the election, your successful election run was the issue of tolls. You campaigned on it heavily. Anyone that's visited, I know this is a Sydney issue, but anyone that's visited from interstate and driven on your roads knows tolls are a big factor. You've got to pay a lot to drive around the place. Are you hemmed in? Are you restricted by the contracts that run decades that simply can't do much because you've got these contracts with Transurban and others that are basically locked in?
Well, Kieran, I'd expect this question from a boy from Fairfield. And look, you're absolutely right. Western Sydney in particular gets smashed from tolls. And the contracts that are in place do limit the government's actions. But that's why we've got an independent review that's had a look at it. Professor Fells, I should say, has delivered a whole range of potential options that the government's looking at very closely. But while we're waiting, crucially, in New South Wales, we have a $60 a week toll cap. We don't want particularly Western Sydney families that don't have access to public transport to be paying through the nose because of the previous government's decisions. So, yes, reform will be difficult, but something's got to change here because at the moment, particularly Western Sydney families are copping it in the neck.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Finally, I know you've got a busy day, but I want to ask you about this issue of medium density housing. I've heard quite a few complaints from councils, mayors, some Labor, not happy with the consultation, the stakeholder management. the government is doing? Can you do more? Where is this at in terms of your policy of basically overriding council control of these development issues?
Yeah, we can do more, and we are. We're meeting with mayors, general managers, heads of planning in all of these councils, and it's a really simple message. If we can get the same or even more housing in those particular areas, we're more than happy to take our planning controls off the table. At the end of the day, all we want is a future for young people, so that young people in this state, in this city, Sydney in particular, don't feel that they have to up and leave to have a future. And the Productivity Commission warned, if we don't make changes, then we'll be a city without grandchildren, and a city without young people is one without a future.
Indeed. Premier Minns, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.